Okay, class, American federal government, we're on to chapter 10, which is on public opinion and political socialization. So there's two things, public opinion, political socialization. Let me talk about public opinion first. So, first of all, public opinion does matter. They're constantly polling, political parties are polling, the presidents are polling, your congressmen, your senators are polling to see where the people stand, because they want to triangulate on that position. It doesn't mean they're going to change their mind on positions, but they will adapt and they will adjust their positions. In other words, they'll emphasize things or de-emphasize things as necessary. One of the best examples I can give you in recent memory was when a lot of during Trump's enforcement of his border policy, you began to see children separated from their parents. The polling on that overwhelming was against that, and it caused the Trump administration to go away from that policy because it was just really bad for them. And that's constantly being updated. Biden's withdrawal, I'm trying to do another example for Biden, his withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was disastrous. The polling on that was really bad, and so they're certainly wanted to bring attention away from that. More recently, they're trying to highlight the improving economy and go with issues that favor them. So you see that they're constantly paying attention to those polls and where people stand on the issues and what's important. The salience of issues is what we call it. What's important to voters, and they're already trying to get that ahead of the 2024 elections that will be coming up soon. The other thing about polls as far as elections are concerned, because you're already seeing polls with regards to the next presidential election, and right now they are in a virtual dead heat. If the presumptive nominees, Trump and Biden, are the nominees indeed, which it looks like they will be, there's a lot of skepticism about the polls, that they're inaccurate, and especially after the last two elections, because it appeared as though they were inaccurate. But actually, the polls were pretty accurate by and large. Polling is a pretty scientific endeavor, and they tend to be pretty accurate. And so the polls had actually nationally predicted in 2016 that Hillary would win by about 3 million votes in the popular vote, and she did. And the same with Biden, won by about 4.5%, and that's actually where about the polls were. But the smaller the sample, the less accurate the poll is, the more margin for error. And at the state level, there tends to be a smaller sample and a greater margin for error. That's just mathematics. And what you saw with regards to Trump too. So you're going to read about in your book, for example, there was polling that was done back in the 1930s, a famous poll, which had showed that Franklin Roosevelt might be in trouble in the 1936 election, that the election was real close. And then he goes on and he wins overwhelmingly. Well, telephones were just being introduced, and mostly wealthy people had access to telephones, and the poor people, that the New Deal Democrats that FDR appealed to, didn't have those. And they were just looking at that, and that skewed the poll. So you have to look at polls. It's not the polling themselves, it's the way the polling was done that can lead to inaccuracies. And that's kind of a famous example. We ran into that in the early days of cell phones because, again, more affluent people had access to cell phones and internet, and less affluent people didn't. But you see that more and more going away now. So there was a little bit of an undercount for sure with regards to Trump voters. And all of the experts and the polling people and the data had shown that there was an undercount in both 2016 and 2020. What accounted for this? Well, it was the distrust that Trump and MAGA Republicans had sown within the whole system, so that when a pollster would ask a person who they're voting for, a Trump person was less likely to answer the poll because of skepticism about the whole system, about whole polls and everything like that. And that happened enough that it skewed the polls slightly. But by and large, they're not that far off, and they kind of give us an indication. So when the polls say right now that they're about evenly split, yeah, they're about evenly split, and that's where we've been for quite some time with our electorate, where it's just been the elections have been so close. The next thing that it talks about is political ideology. I hope that you take a look at what the difference is between a conservative, a liberal, and a moderate, and where we get these terms and what they mean. If it was a class and I had a chance to spend 45 minutes on it, I would gladly do that. And I do that in my traditional classes. But that is something you need to know, the difference between those to understand our political world today. Basically, it has to do with change. Conservatives, the term conservative means cautious. They don't like change as much. And then with liberals, and then you get even radical, which would be more open to change. Now, sometimes that's flipped on its head and it's not as easily defined, but typically, if you look at, for example, LGBT rights, liberals tend to be more open to change and conservatives are more conservative on those issues. It can be flipped on its head. So, for example, you have reactionary too, which would want to go back to the way things were. But as it says, there's problems with labels, and you'll see that when you do this week's discussion post, because your assignment is to take a political typology quiz and see where you fall. So that's one of your assignments. I realize that typology quiz, it boxes you in on certain issues, and it's hard to be boxed in like that. It's just trying to get a range of where you fall on that political spectrum. But I understand that is annoying, but it's just for purposes of this class to kind of see where you fall. Certainly, that doesn't mean you're pegged into that. No doubt. I understand that. And then the other assignment that I had you do is think about your political socialization. So, for example, my parents and I align pretty close politically. The family often is the biggest influencer of your politics. However, my brothers, I have two older brothers, and they're very different from my parents and I. And in fact are opposite. So the family is not the be all and end all. So what's had the biggest influence in your life? Is it your family, or do you now break away from your family? Like, no, I don't really agree with them, and we don't talk much about it at Thanksgiving. Or is it the mass media? Because I know the mass media has a huge influence, especially I think Fox News has an outsourced influence, outweighed influence than most other media outlets on people's political attitudes and views. Certainly now the internet does. I see that a lot. I think a lot of people are hesitant to admit that, but it does. So, sorry about this announcement. I can't, this is my third recording, so I'm not going to redo this one. But yeah, the media can have an influence. Demographics, religion, ethnicity often has an influence on people's political socialization. So your assignment then is which of these, and there's probably more than one, has the biggest influence on who you've become politically. And by the way, that's likely to change. Most people don't stay boxed in as a liberal or a conservative. People evolve and change over time. I think that's actually kind of a sign of growth, because you're open to new ideas and things like that. So something to think about. So, all right, it's a fun chapter. I hope you enjoy it.